Story 1. I cut off my married friend who tried to get me to share a bed with him, but our mutual friend wants nothing to do with me now. I, female 30, had been friends with Mark, male 40-ish, for about 7 years at the time of this incident. We met at a job in college where a group of us became friends and hung out outside of work. Mark had a full-time job but was working there to make extra cash. Mark and I never hung out individually outside of work, but the entire group kept in touch and hung out regularly for a few years after graduation. Mark ended up moving across the country to Alaska and got married. Our group started to make plans to go and visit him for a week. This was 3 years ago when I was 27. For various reasons, everyone else ended up having to back out of the trip. I was hesitant at first to go by myself, but figured it would be fine, and his wife was also going to have a friend there. Things were weird immediately when he picked me up from the airport. He was acting a lot differently than before. Something that immediately made me uncomfortable was finding out he had been lying to us about his age. We had to check me into the base where he lives, and I found out he was in his early 40s, instead of around my age like he had always led all of us to believe. It was even weirder when I got to their house. Him and his wife constantly bickered and put each other down. Anytime we were alone, he was still acting off. Like if we went to do something just the two of us, he was acting towards me like you would a date. He also kept pushing for details of my past relationship and asked things like what the sex life was like. The most uncomfortable part was when we were supposed to go on a boat excursion. The plan had been that we would drive there, spend the night, go on the excursion, and come back. The day before, I find out that his wife's friend is leaving. Okay, it will just be him, me, and wife. Nope. The day we're going to leave, I find out she actually has to work, and it will just be the two of us. This made me super uncomfortable, but I convinced myself it was fine if his wife was okay with it. We get to this very isolated little Alaskan town where I have no signal. We get to the B&B only to find out that he has only booked us one room with one bed and a loft with a mat. We get to the room and he immediately starts asking if we should share the bed. I refused several times and just climbed up to the loft, and we really didn't speak the rest of the night. I was honestly kind of scared. I had no signal, no car, no internet, and this was in a town which is only accessible by boat or a mountain pass that opens twice a day. We went on the excursion the next day and didn't have a lot of time to really interact. Drove back to his house where I just hung out with his wife and him the rest of the night. The next morning they drove me to the airport and said goodbye. I let him know I made it back okay and have ignored him ever since. It was such an uncomfortable, honestly kind of scary experience that I want nothing to do with him anymore. He has continued to reach out through text or social media the past few years. This has increased with him visiting home this past month and wanting to get the group back together for lunch. I haven't really talked to anyone from the group since because we had all kind of naturally drifted apart since the trip fell through. A girl from our original group recently moved back to town and has started hanging out in my current friend group due to non-involved mutual friends. She's ignored me the whole time and eventually told me she was mad at me because I had cut off Mark with no explanation. I explained to her what happened and she said I was just blowing the whole thing out of proportion. I've been very hurt by her reaction and unsure how to navigate my current friend group with her in it. Apparently, she's been bad-mouthing me in the group too. She's been making me paranoid that maybe I had done something wrong with the whole thing. Was I wrong? How do I navigate this current situation now? TLDR. My married friend coerced me into sharing a hotel room with him and then tried to get me to share a bed with him. I cut him off, but our mutual friend is mad at me and bad-mouthing me to others. What do I do? Now for the comment, you're doing everything right. Feel free to drop that girl as a friend. She isn't worth the turmoil and self-doubt she is trying to sow. My guess that Mark has spun the story to make him look like the victim, but gave just enough details so that it would make it look like OP was being overdramatic about it. Given she's already in your group, cutting her off doesn't really seem viable without losing all your friends. I would honestly press the topic with her fully to try to find out what Mark told her, and gently try to explain that the whole thing made you uncomfortable, and that it's not okay for a married man to share a bed with another woman. The whole story just seems odd, Like we're maybe missing info. Like, did he have a hand in getting other people to not come? The boat excursion really has me scratching my head too. You assumed 4 people total: OP, wife, Mark, and wife friend. Did you just assume Mark had booked all the rooms for you? I would have thought you'd book your own lodging here since Mark would have booked for him and his wife. Did you guys not discuss this? I feel like you should have texts confirming that he booked either a 2BR place, so switching to a 1BR because it was only you two would be super weird. I've split many of B&Bs with friends before, and not once have I not checked it out myself. Mostly because I didn't want to get stuck in a situation where I didn't have a bed to myself. Just seems off to me. I don't think he had a hand in the other friends not coming on the trip. It seemed like they all had viable excuses. Mark was handling the planning and booking of excursions rooms because he knew the area, and it was easier to have one person book stuff. Originally, there were supposed to be 3 rooms for everyone. I was originally supposed to share a room with another 2 girls, another friend and his wife's friend. Then there was supposed to be a room for him and his wife and another room for the other guys that were going. He handled all of the reservations, but I obviously didn't assume he would cancel the room I was supposed to be in so I could share a room with him when everyone else backed. When other people backed out, he sent me a new totals for the stuff we were going to do. When I looked back on them, he had a line for bed and breakfast, and the price had gone up from the original plan. I assumed that this was because I was going to be paying for the room for myself. Not that he had canceled it, but I don't really have a way of knowing exactly what he did with all of that. Believe me, I have handled all other accommodations and plans for things since this on my own. I just trusted him because he was my friend. Geez, yeah, that's kinda weird as fuff then. Not sure why that chick isn't being understanding of the situation, because to me it seems very black and white. Sorry if I seem to be untrusting in my comment, there's just usually a lot of missing info in these kind of posts. But like I said, seems pretty straightforward. Dude seems like a creep. If the rest of your friend group is mature enough, they'll ignore this girl bad-mouthing you for a situation she wasn't a part of. I really wouldn't stress over it. If the rest of your friend group is immature, then you need new friends. If you have a good group of friends, they'll see that she's the one who walked in trying to start drama, not you. You may want to bring up the tension with someone you're closest to in the group and explain what happened. Bad-mouthing her back will only make you both look like headaches. If your friends try to pretend nothing is weird or take her side over yours, cut your losses and find better people to hang out with. Just ignore her. If she speaks poorly of you repeatedly, she will make herself look bad. There's nothing wrong with avoiding a man who treated you inappropriately, and I don't know how she could misrepresent that to make you look bad. Trust your friends to treat you fairly. Avoid the drama, and they will see you're the better friend. Story 2. How do I get my husband to set boundaries with my stepdaughter without making him feel attacked or nagged? How do I ask my husband to do things differently without being too aggressive? For context, we have a tough living situation that has been hard on both of us. I have probably vented too many times and acknowledged that I have made him feel nagged and attacked, unintentionally. And now he shuts down when I try to have a tough conversation, fully willing to accept my fault in this. How do I fix it? His daughter, 15, normally lives with her mom, but has been staying with us for her Christmas break and is planning to live with us for her junior year next year. I generally have no problem with this. Except from what I understand, he and his ex treat the daughter like she's the boss, husband's words, and let her do what she wants within reason, what they consider reasonable. She's a good kid, all things considered, but she still has some expectations that are baffling to me, and her dad doesn't seem to understand the concept of boundaries. In short, she's kinda spoiled but not really nasty, you know? Some of that includes staying up all night video gaming and talking to her friends on the phone. I mean until 2, 3 in the morning. Every night. I can hear her from our room. It doesn't bother me because I'm a night owl, but she shares a wall with my mother-in-law, and I know my mother-in-law can hear her. A few days ago, I gently brought up to him that he might want to ask stepdaughter to be considerate of mother-in-law. He said, "If mom tells me it's a problem, I'll let her know." Now, I know my mother-in-law, and she is not the type to complain even if she's very inconvenienced. Still, I dropped the subject. Today, my mother-in-law was still in bed at around 11 a.m., and so my brother-in-law came up and yelled at her to get out of bed. He's an a-hole and we all want him to leave. She was upset and told my husband that she was in bed so long because my stepdaughter kept her up all night talking on the phone. Instead of saying, "You're right, Mom, I'll talk to her," he told her she should have said something earlier and it's her fault for not saying something to her granddaughter sooner, even though I had already brought it up to him, to manage his kid. This might be a good time to mention that my mother-in-law had a brain tumor removed 2 years ago, but it severely impacted her speech and simple conversations are hard for her, but especially a conversation where she's airing a grievance with someone. I'm uncomfortable with the exchange. It feels like when she's here next year, everything will revolve around her, and the household will be asked to treat the kid as the boss, like her parents do. I'm not going to get into a parenting debate with him. I have no kids, no skin in the game. But I do want to set the expectation with him that he can't expect the rest of the household to cater to his daughter like that. How can I reasonably bring this up without nagging or attacking, or making it seem like I don't want her here at all? TLDR. I want to have a conversation with my husband about setting boundaries with his daughter when she comes to live with us, but I don't want to make him feel attacked or nagged. Help. Now for the comments. The daughter is not the problem. She's being a typical teenager. It's your husband. Why are you with a man who would treat his own mother like this, after having a brain tumor? Do you think he'll treat you any better in your old age? Your MIL doesn't say anything because no one gives a fuff. I feel sorry for her. You'll end up just like her if you stay in this toxic family. Agreed. Sounds like a spineless lump to me. Oh, I'm aware the kid isn't the problem. I guess my question is, how do I let my husband know he's the problem without exploding my marriage? He is a good person. He's under a lot of stress and worried about alienating his daughter. Complicated relationship. But he doesn't have to be a military hard-ass just to get her to be considerate. Would he be willing to go to couples family counseling? It's a possibility. I'd really recommend it for all blended families. There's so much doubt and guilt, even in the best-case scenario. I'm sure he is nearly overcome with guilt on a regular basis because his child's been raised outside of what he envisioned for his kid once upon a time. But with therapy, hopefully he can realize that this current situation is not helping her at all. In fact, he's doing her a real disservice and setting her up for failure in the very near future. He's also causing issues in his marriage with you and in his relationship with his mother. Literally no one is benefiting from this setup. He feels guilty still, you are frustrated, the mother-in-law can't sleep and is being treated like crap, and the kid isn't learning how to behave in a shared household. Hey husband, I'd like to talk with you about what happened the other day with your mom. I felt really shocked and sad when I heard how you responded to her concerns. Can you tell me more about why you reacted the way you do? The most important thing is to focus on how his actions are impacting you. You may have reasonable critiques of his parenting, but as you say, that's not your circus. However, you live in the house too, and your feelings about dealing with the situation around you are valid. Right, wife's feelings matter here. She lives here too. I'm always blown away how people always say it's not their kid, so they don't do parenting. But in situations like this, it's not parenting so much as cohabitating and coexisting. And how the hell are people not allowed to set rules for their house? Okay, not your kid, not your monkey, but you're part of the effing circus too. Especially since apparently y'all have his mother and his a-hole brother also living with you. That is a lot of circus. And your feelings and how comfortable you are in your house absolutely matter. She's not your monkey, but you're not her monkey. And she doesn't get to be the boss of your house and life when she moves in. And it's husband's responsibility to communicate and enforce the house rules that the both of you create, and maybe talk with mother-in-law and get her input too. Story 3. Should we help my in-laws pay off their debt when they refuse to sell their expensive property? Hi everyone, I'm 32 male, looking for advice on a complicated financial situation involving my in-laws. Here's the context. My wife, 30 females' parents took out a 100,000 euros loan to cover the costs of maintaining their large property and some other, yet unknown, expenses. The house, estimated to be worth over 600,000 euros, was inherited many years ago and goes far beyond their financial means. Despite their struggles, they refuse to consider selling it, and my wife's siblings are also determined to preserve the property. The issue is that my in-laws lack the ability to manage their financial resources responsibly. They tend to spend more than they can afford, are not careful with their money, and have no habit of saving or planning for the future. They've now asked their children, including my wife, to help cover the monthly loan payments during the next 10 years, as they're no longer able to manage the debt on their own. While this might seem like a way to help, I'm deeply concerned that it won't solve the underlying problem. I also fear there may be additional expenses, like home maintenance, repairs, or even other debts, that we don't yet know about. Our situation makes this even more challenging. My wife and I are already financially strained. We rent, have no savings for a mortgage. I've been unemployed for 2 years to stay at home with my child. Taking on any financial responsibility like this feels impossible, also because we would like to save money to buy a house. My wife's siblings, however, are single, have stable jobs, and are in a much better position to help. I'm worried that agreeing to help will drag us into a cycle of financial dependence that we simply cannot afford. What should we do? Is it fair to ask us to contribute when they have such a valuable property they refuse to sell? How can we navigate this without damaging family relationships? Are there smarter ways to approach this situation? Any advice or perspective would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. TLDR. My in-laws can't pay their 100,000 euros loan and want their children to help. They refuse to sell their 600,000 euros house, but my wife and I are financially strained with no savings and a child. Concerned this won't solve their poor financial habits and may lead to hidden costs. Seeking advice. Edit. More info. Although this seems like a crazy idea to me, my wife's judgment might be clouded. She thinks it would be better to sell the house, but at the same time, she feels pressured because she's in the minority and after all, they are her parents, and she wants to help them. The real issue, however, isn't just the current debt, but the fact that if their finances are already in the red, all future unforeseen expenses would also fall on us. Now for the comments, you literally can't afford it. Would it strain the family relationships to say that? Your wife, not you, should tell them you aren't in a position to help at this time and are still saving for your own home, but you'll try if things change in the future. If things do change, you can offer a set flat amount, no more. Keep in mind that if you don't help, you shouldn't expect an inheritance from them, although they may be underwater on all of them, and you're never guaranteed an inheritance anyway. Something tells me there will be no inheritance regardless. No. If your wife were an only child and would inherit all of the house when her parents die, maybe there might be an argument for helping, but she'd only wind up with a fractional share of the inheritance, such that it may be given their extremely poor financial decisions. So even if you could afford to help, I'd say it is not worth the ROI. But you clearly cannot afford to help, so of course the answer is a resounding no. Parents are supposed to be their kids' safety net, not the other way around. Even if she were the only child, her parents don't have to leave her the house. Between what sound like crappy spending habits and the costs of healthcare and elder care these days, there may not be anything left for anyone to inherit. If the parents want to sell the kids fractional shares of the house in exchange for funding their living expenses, they should talk to a lawyer about that. Your kid comes first. How is accepting this fair to them? You would be giving your kid a crappy life to help out your clueless in-laws. Say no, we can't afford it. And that's it. There's no need to explain why you can't. It's none of their business. How is accepting this fair to them? This is also my question. Never set yourself on fire to warm someone else. This is such a bad idea on so many levels, as others have pointed out. I do like the idea of meeting with a financial planner who would be an independent opinion and can be very blunt with everyone about your in-laws' precarious situation. Do you think I could just set up an appointment to get some advice, or they will try to sell us some other service? You would want to get a meeting with a planner who charges a set fee for time and not by the products they sell. When you in-laws become so destitute that they have nowhere to live, you could offer they live with you rather than letting them live under a bridge. But until then, focus on putting the air mask on yourself before helping others. It's not fair to support their retirement life over the chance of saving enough for you to one day retire so that you don't become a similar burden on their grandchild. If you were on track to save towards your own goals of being self-sufficient, saving for a house, retirement, maybe money set aside for your child to not be in want, then maybe any spare money could be donated to the in-laws. But you don't have it. How much do you currently donate to charity? You could feasibly put those funds towards them. I'm assuming you don't. I might be wrong, but that's the idea. Whatever money you wouldn't miss. I mean, if we assume you'll inherit it in the future, but maybe they'd cut you out if you don't help. You still can't afford to. The issue is that communication with the in-laws laying down the law kind of needs to come from their daughter. So this is a question of if your wife is on board with setting boundaries with them. Exactly. The point is that, although this seems like a crazy and absurd idea to me, my wife and her parents are involved, and understandably, her judgment might be clouded. So she might end up deciding to go along with paying this debt. The real issue, however, isn't just the current debt, but given that their finances are already in the red, all future unexpected expenses will fall on us.
Thank you for listening. If you like the video, consider like and subscribe. If you want more stories like these, turn on your notification to receive the latest stories.